Hey guys, my name is Reese, and in this video, I'm going to tell you guys my 3 best tips when it comes to doing and practicing voice impressions. Tip number 1 is very important, and it's to know where you lie on the vocal spectrum. And once you realize that, know your limitations. So find your place on the vocal spectrum. What do I mean by that? That's tip number 1. And what that means is to really be honest with yourself about where your voice lies. Is it high pitched? Is it low pitched? Is it bass, baritone, tenor? Sometimes it's hard to figure out on your own. You can ask your friends or family. You can go, hey, whenever I speak to you guys, what would you say my voice is? Is it deep? Is it high pitched? Ask other people. That's a great way to get some feedback and have a better grasp on that. But this tip number 1 is very critical because it governs how you will approach voice impressions at large. So I'll use myself as an example. I understand that my voice is a little bit on the deeper side. I don't know if I have a full-on bass voice like this, but it's maybe a little bit of bass, baritone, and I've just figured that out over the years. I can hear myself speak. I've had people tell me I have a bit of a deeper voice. I've gotten that kind of feedback, like I suggested you get from other people. And so I have a really solid understanding of where I lie. And I know that I use that as a lens by which to approach doing voices. So what do I mean? I mean that I know that since my voice is a little bit deeper, I can get away with doing deeper characters, deeper voiced people, deeper voiced video game characters, you name it. That's way more accessible and causes less strain on my vocal cords than characters on the higher end of the spectrum. And so this is another point I would like to make. I can still do voices that are a little more high pitched like this. You know what I mean? But that's just genetics. Everybody lies somewhere on the vocal spectrum, but it's a matter of genetics, just how your vocal cords are shaped, and just your diaphragm, how much air you can push through there, the size of your chest width, all that is just genetics on how further past your natural place you sit, you can push your voice, and that's just kind of something you have to accept. If you hit the same pitch that I'm hitting right now, and you have to really strain to do that, then if it's causing you pain, then that's not where you can stretch your voice, and you have to be really realistic, kind of harshly realistic with yourself, and not strain your voice to do some of the higher pitched stuff. If for example you're on the lower end of the spectrum like me, and you just don't have the genetics to be able to like just go crazy high, then it's your responsibility when doing voice impressions to stick where you are at and stretch yourself only as far as you can without causing pain. So to wrap up tip number 1, you need to be very harshly realistic with where you sit on the vocal spectrum, and really be honest with yourself about how far you can stretch higher or lower without causing strain or pain. That's incredibly important. And you should never be hurting your voice when you're trying to do voice impressions. Never. If you do and you are consistently in pain, you're doing something wrong, and that can cause long-term damage that's not really good. I even have long-term damage from being very foolish back in the day. Sprout where you're planted. If wherever you are, you can't really push, higher or lower beyond that, doesn't matter. There's so many voices that you can do. Even if you're just focused on where your natural register is, there's so many voices that you can do with that. There's so many deep voiced characters out there. There's so many high pitched characters out there. Woo! There's so many. So even if you can't stretch one way or the other, you're good, man. You're fine. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, and this is specific to practicing voice impressions, is to sweat the small stuff. What I've found when in most voice impressions, if not all, there is always one critical detail that just makes the impression. I don't think any particular voice is exempt from this rule. It usually boils down to one critical component of the voice that if you spot, if you listen to the character or the person over and over and over again, and you finally spot it and you drill it and you practice over and over and over again, and you kind of, with that critical detail in mind, it's going to make the impression a home run. It'll light up those light bulbs of recognition in everybody's minds when they hear you do it for them. They'll be like, oh shit, he's got it. So that's what I'm talking about. So to illustrate this example, I'm going to do an impression. It was one of actually the first impressions I've ever done when I was a kid. Is Herbert the pervert from Family Guy. And I'm going to do it once normally and then a second time while omitting that critical detail. So here's the first go around.
Say there, Chris. Why the long face? Oh, go on, Jesse. Go make your peeps and poops.
Okay, Jesus, that was the first go around. Here's the second one, omitting that critical detail, which y'all can probably guess what it is.
Hey, Chris. Why the long face? You like popsicles? I got a whole freezer full of popsicles down in my cellar. Go on, Jesse. Go make those peeps and poops.
Okay. You probably could spot it, right? It's the bird whistle. It's the S, the way he does his S's. So that was a little bit of an exaggerated example, I'll admit, but it hammers the point home for tip number 2. You need to find that critical detail. Every voice has one. And drill it, drill it, drill it. Which brings me into tip number 3. And this might be some very just cookie cutter, copy paste kind of advice. But I feel like it's worth mentioning because it is so critical to doing voice impressions accurately and really chipping away and honing it down to something, a really worthy product. And that is to practice, practice, practice. I can't stress this enough. When it comes to anything that requires a certain degree of skill, practice is what separates, the mediocre from the top, the best. And nobody is exempt from this. The best practice all the time. And some tips I can give on some micro tips within this tip I can give is within practicing, there's some things to keep in mind. And that's to not overdo it. Again, your voice is just kind of your human instrument. And you can overdo it. I've made that mistake so many times and I've paid for it, and sometimes for days at a time. My computer just fell asleep. For days at a time having kind of a scratchy voice because I just kept going and going and going and going. You have to have water around. Practice. If you stretch yourself too far, even a hair, and do it for too long, you're going to cause some damage. No shit. That's how it works. So you must listen to your body and you must be mindful of when you're pushing it too far. I have sustained damage. Take it from me. I have sustained damage over the years from pushing it too far over and over and over again. My suggestion in terms of a time frame to work with is practice a voice, any voice, whatever it is, for 10 minutes, 10 or 12 minutes at a time. Then take a 3-4 minute break. Then go back at it for 10 minutes. Just do it in chunks. Do it in chunks. And the other thing I will say about practice is to just learn to be not self-conscious about practicing. When you practice voice impressions, you kind of have to become a one-man or a one-woman insane asylum. It's true. So if you have roommates, let them know, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm practicing this voice. Don't mind me. I'm not losing my mind, I promise. Just kind of set those caveats, and just go for it. A tip I have for times to practice is I always practice in my car. Always practice in your car. It's kind of a safe little zone where you can go, just say whatever you want, do whatever you want. In traffic, it doesn't even fucking matter. I go wild in traffic trying to like just talk to myself, and people on the left and the right in traffic will be doing this whole thing where they're just like just looking at me like there's something wrong with me. And in some ways there is, you know, if you're just trying to imitate somebody else for extended periods of time. But I'll get into that some other time. But yeah, you have to learn to just tune that shit out and just not give a shit and just go for it. Even though it's very clear you don't have Bluetooth and you are just talking to yourself in your car. And just to learn to not be self-conscious about it. It's been a practice for me that I've been trying to get better at. Considering I'm not sure how thick these walls are. I live alone, so I don't have roommates, but I have people living above and below me. And sometimes when I sing, when I'm cooking, I have to wonder if I'm just like subjecting either my upstairs or downstairs neighbors to just this unbearable concert every day at around 6:30 when I cook dinner. I've learned to just not give a fuck. And you have to just learn to not give a fuck when practicing. Just go for it. Drill it over and over and over again, and that's how you truly get better. Last thing I'll say about practice is, this is actually turning into like 5 or 6 tips, but who cares? The last thing I'll say about practice is I suggest you find an audio clip or video clip of the person or character that you're trying to imitate. And what you do is you do in one of my other videos, if you've seen it, where you basically watch a couple seconds of the video of the character talking, and then you pause immediately while the audio of what they just said is just fresh in your brain, and just do your best to parrot it. Just do your best to imitate it, and then rewind it if you need to. Just rewind. There's some buttons on your keyboard sometimes with YouTube where you just press 1 and it'll go back like 5 seconds. It's the left arrow key. You can go back 5 seconds and then just play, listen to it again, do it again, rewind, play, do it again, rewind, play, do it again. I'm telling you guys, this is how you get better at voices. And so that's one way I do it. And then another way is you don't necessarily even have to have that video, right? Maybe when you watch, and this is something I do, when you watch the video back and you're drilling like that past 5 seconds over and over again, you rewind, play, you'll inevitably find one clip of them saying something, a catchphrase or just a phrase that sounds good to you, that kind of sticks in your head that like, hey, maybe I nailed that one. Write that one down or just remember it and use it as what I'd call like your practice totem, this thing you can always kind of rely on as your centering kind of mechanism for how you do the voice. So for an example, what do I mean by like a practice totem? It could be a catchphrase or like an audio clip of them saying something that really worked with you that you just did good at. So what I mean by this is, you know, for example, like Peter Griffin. For me, the practice totem for Peter Griffin is just saying, "Hi, I'm Peter Griffin," over and over again. Just the simple phrase, "Hi, I'm Peter Griffin," it undulates and captures all his little inflections in just about everything else he says. So it is like kind of an amalgamation, perfect example of everything Peter could possibly say. Hi, I'm Peter Griffin. Just the New England accent, just everything about it. So I was like, "Hi, I'm Peter Griffin," and then I'll hear myself do it, and then kind of adjust. Hey, Peter Griffin. Hey, Peter Griffin. Hey, Peter Griffin. Hi, I'm Peter Griffin. I'm Peter Griffin. I'm Peter Griffin. I'm Peter Griffin. Oh, hey, I'm Peter Griffin. I'm Peter Griffin. Hi, I'm Peter Griffin. Just drilling that over and over again. That wasn't exactly perfect, but you get the idea. Even if it's just that one phrase, just do it over and over and over again. And that can be your way of being able to kind of fine tune things when you don't have like a video of them speaking in front of you. So yeah, that's my last piece of advice when it comes to the third piece of advice, which was practice, practice, practice. I know this was very disorganized, but things just kind of kept popping up in my head as I was talking. So yeah, to recap, tip number 1 is to find your place on the vocal spectrum. Own it. Sprout where you're planted and stretch yourself only as far as you're genetically capable, because the danger is that you could hurt your voice over time. Tip number 2 is to sweat the small stuff. Find that critical little detail. Every voice has one. The example of the Herbert the Pervert voice. Every single voice has one. And then tip number 3 is to practice, practice, practice. Excuse me. In the ways that I suggested. The best way being, to find a video and then just drill it over and over again. Listen to the last 5 seconds. Rewind, 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 and then find that practice totem, that catchphrase or that phrase that you hear them say that you just really gels with you, that you can feel like you can just do over and over again as a way to kind of calibrate and center the voice. Again, it doesn't have to be very long. It can literally just be like, "Hey, Peter Griffin." That's sometimes all it takes. So, yeah, those are my best 3 tips I've thought of for somebody who wants to get into voice impressions. Things to keep in mind. I know that some of those painted some pretty broad brushstrokes, but I was just thinking in terms of somebody who's just really wanting to get started doing voices, doing voice impressions. What they've got to keep in mind, very foundational things. So I really hope this was helpful to some of y'all. I do really appreciate y'all giving this a watch. If it's almost, oh my God, it's almost like 19 minutes. So yeah, thank you so much if you made it this far. I know this was extremely long, but I thought everything I said was pretty important. So yeah, I will see y'all in the next video. I've got some good stuff coming up. I've recorded this on my new gaming PC, so I'm going to start trolling in online games, doing a little bit more of that, and I've got some exciting stuff planned for y'all. Thank you very much again, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.